On today's episode, the Dallas Stars are slumping. We talk about what's causing the issues and how long we can expect things to be like this and when we can expect the team to turn things around. All of this coming up on a Monday episode of Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, your local expert on all things Dallas Stars hockey, coming to you on this Monday, February 20th. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more and visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener of the show, thank you for stopping by and making us your first listen of the day. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube or the follow button on your favorite podcasting platform. Always, we are free and available no matter where or how you choose to listen to the show. And it's a tough time here as those of us following the Dallas Stars. This weekend, a great opportunity for the team to get back on track. Been a little bit of a dry spell for the team, and you get a back-to-back against the Wild and the Blue Jackets. A great opportunity to pick up 4 points and kind of reestablish yourself as the favorites and the front runners in the Central Division, but the team ends up settling for one, and what is starting to feel like a new low for the team this season. And there's several different reasons why this is happening. We, of course, know that the Stars' power play is broken right now. The entire offense, really, if you look at it, has slid into a deep, deep slumber and really just cannot seem to get anything going outside of just about one regulation goal per game. Since the NHL came back from the All-Star break, the Stars are 28th in the NHL in goals scored at only 11. Only 11 goals scored since the team has come back from the All-Star break, and they are only one of 3 teams without a power play goal since the All-Star break, joining the likes of the Vegas Golden Knights and the Chicago Blackhawks, which is pretty ironic given that these teams will be meeting later this week, and likely one or both of them will be looking to break out of this dry spell on the power play since the All-Star break. And these are 2 things that have really been the driving force for this Stars team this season, is their ability to score goals. Even just as early as the first few seasons of the game, they're putting up 4, 5, 6 goals just about every single night. And now we're starting to see them look a little bit more like last year's team, where they're maybe getting 1 or 2 a game and they're having to rely on good defense and good goaltending to get them wins. And while Jake Ottinger and Scott Wedgwood to some extent have been pretty good, it's just not working out for them. And of course, even if you get a game to, go to overtime, go to a shootout, we all know how that has gone for the Stars this season. This is a team without an offensive identity at the moment. And it's not just the depth pieces. It's just about everybody that's finding trouble burying the puck in the back of the net. And then you even look at Saturday's game and really just nothing going the Stars' way. They have 2 goals that get disallowed. An offsides call, one that was pretty obvious upon review, and then a goalie interference call that I get why it was called, but at the same time, you definitely want to see something like that, a shot like that from Wyatt Johnston go in, and that's just how things are going for the Stars at this point. They really cannot get anything to go their way, whether it's things within their control or things outside of their control as well. And they're also starting to see injuries bleed into the lineup a little bit. We saw Yoel Kiviranta go down a little bit ago, and so we've had guys filling in for him. And now we have an even bigger blow to the bottom 6 with Luke Glendening being injured. He's out week to week, according to the Stars coaching staff. And that's a big sting to this team. Of course, we know Glendening is not the biggest goal getter. He's never really been that with the Stars, but he does so many other little things for this team, like the winning faceoffs. He's one of, if not the best faceoff guy on the team. He's also an excellent penalty killer in terms of the forwards you want out there on the ice. So if you see the Stars numbers take a dip at the faceoff dot or on the penalty kill, which has been one of the few bright spots for the team throughout the entirety of the season, but even especially now, it's still pretty solid. If we start to see a dip in those two areas, that's a huge reason why, because Luke Glendening, who's been rock solid at both of those spots for this team, is now going to be out for the next several games, it appears, with some sort of injury. And I mean, it's just one thing after another at this point in the season. You lose that heartbreaking loss in the final seconds to the Tampa Bay Lightning in regulation. You play a really good game against the best team in the league in the Boston Bruins. And you find a way to lose that game too. You allow it to get tied. You allow the game to go to overtime. You lose that one. Then you have plenty of time off to get prepared for the next games. And things are just slowly but surely starting to unravel a little bit here for the Dallas Stars. And at the beginning of the season, there was little to no adversity for this team. That things were going well, even up until around New Year's Eve. And I remember there being discussions going into that game on Stars pregame shows, on the radio, on TV, what have you, about how this team, it really had been smooth sailing outside of a few tough losses here and there. But, relatively injury free, the offense humming on all cylinders, scoring 2 to 3, if not more goals a night, getting great goaltending. And some of those things have stayed true. They're still getting good goaltending most nights. And, they're still one of the more relatively healthy teams, all things considered. But we're finally starting to see some real adversity come the Stars' way. And they need to find a way out very soon. Their toughness is being heavily tested right now. And it will continue to be just that for this team over the next several weeks and likely until they get to the playoffs. I think that this division race is continuing to get tighter and tighter night in and night out. The Stars are fortunate that the Winnipeg Jets have a tough schedule coming up over the next week or so. They lose to the New Jersey Devils on Sunday night. They play the New York Rangers tonight at Madison Square Garden. But the Colorado Avalanche picked up 2 points on Sunday, and they're starting to creep back up into the race for the top of the division, just like many people expected they would once they get healthy. And they're still, the Avalanche, not 100% healthy. Cale Makar has been out for a while now and is likely going to miss a few more games here down the road. But the Stars are starting to feel the pressure a little bit. And I think we're going to learn more about this team and what they're made of and what they do to get out of this dry spell, to get out of this slump and get back to being the team that we know that they can be. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk about some of the changes that can be made for the Stars. And one of those changes can be a trade. And we'll talk about why the Stars need to make a move, not necessarily immediately, but maybe sooner rather than later. More on that right after this. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by our friends at Athletic Greens. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging. Tons of people take some kind of multivitamin, and it's important to choose one with high-quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb. AG1 is a small micro habit with big benefits. It's one thing you can do every single day to take great care of yourself, and it's lifestyle friendly. So whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it contains 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, and no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while tasting good, and it supports better sleep quality, recovery, and supports mental clarity and alertness. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Thank you again for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Continuing to talk about what is going on with this team. They've slipped into a cold spell. They really cannot get anything to go their way in the games themselves, but also the results of the games not picking up points at the rate they need to in order to secure that number 1 spot in the Central Division as well as the Western Conference. And there's, obviously you cannot look at a situation like this and assume that things are going to stay the same within the lineup, within the locker room, things of that nature. And of course, line shuffling is expected, and it's something that we did get a little bit of on Saturday night against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Part of that probably due to some of the injuries that we've seen, of course, with Glendening and Kiviranta, but also just with the team playing the way that they are. It's expected that you would see a few players get moved up and down to different lines while maintaining a few of the pairings, like the top line, and then, of course, keeping Wyatt Johnston and Jamie Benn together. But other than that, A lot of guys getting moved around, but line shuffling will only get you so far at this point in the season. The Stars, in my mind, and I think many others as well, I'm sure many of you agree, their need of a bigger change at this point. The need to shake things up is very evident within this team, and the deadline provides a convenient opportunity for the Stars to shake things up. And so, of course, we know that they could swing for the fences and go out and get a really big name player, Patrick Kane, who just got a hat trick yesterday, or even a guy like Timo Meyer. I don't think that they'll go after Kane. I feel like those rumors have been shot down. I think Timo Meyer is probably going somewhere out east, but adding a guy like Timo Meyer would certainly be nice and would likely supply some sort of kickstart to the Dallas offense, which they would desperately need. And maybe it's one of those guys, maybe it's someone else, one of the guys that we talked about on Friday. But the point is that the Stars need to go out and add somebody who can come in and supply a bit of an edge, but also provide a little bit of scoring. A player like Max Domi, who I've talked about at length before, saying I think he'd be a good fit. A guy who is hungry for more time in the playoffs, a guy who plays with a lot of edge. Max Domi is not the biggest guy on the ice, but he plays a feisty, fiery game night in and night out, and also leads his current team in scoring. And you just look at where the Stars are at this juncture in the season, and there's a desperate need to shake things up and add maybe a new presence to the locker room. And I think that does several different things for this team. For one, it adds that potential offensive output, and you get more production from the team. And that's why teams like the Stars, teams that are considered contenders, go out and they add these pieces to do that. But also, I think it adds pressure to a few players on the team that might be fighting for job security next season. And it brings the most out of both parties. The new player who's been added to this team to add, to take that squad over the top and put them in a good position to win a championship. But then the remaining guys on that roster that have been there all season, they now have a little bit more competition. And you think, okay, are they going to try to re-sign this guy next year? Could he be coming from my roster spot? And I think it goes both ways, where it gets both parties hopefully to be motivated to be the best they can be on the ice night in and night out in order to secure themselves a job for next season, whether that be with the Stars or even potentially with another team if they do come to free agency or a trade in the offseason. And I understand it's easier said than done to make a trade happen. At this point, we know the deadline is rapidly approaching, just about 2 weeks away. But I mean, you got to understand that there's so much more that goes into it than just saying, "Oh, well, we'll take this guy and we'll give you this guy." We all know that Jim Nill is a master at things like this. He's done very well recently with free agency, trades, the draft. And so obviously there's a system that he has going. There's a method to what he's doing at this point. I'm sure that there's a lot going on behind the scenes, behind closed doors that we're not necessarily aware of, but he has his methods. And I think this is one of those situations, as cheesy as it sounds and maybe as unsatisfying as it sounds. We just have to trust the process in this situation and know that Jim Nill is seeing what we're seeing on the ice night in and night out, understands where the Stars are at this point in the season, knowing that they're lacking a little bit offensively, knowing that they're needing that extra push to get them back to where they were earlier on this season. And so you have to imagine that he's doing everything in his power to add to the team now, looking to not sell too much in the future, but getting this team to a point where they get that much needed spark, where they get that extra little push that they need in order to get back to being themselves. And so it's one of those things where two things can be true at once, where you can be disappointed where the team is at right now, but you can also understand that adversity is going to happen over the course of an 82 game season. We could not realistically expect the season to go as smooth as it did, the first few months of the season. And it's just an unfortunate circumstance that the Stars find themselves in now, but it could be much worse. I feel like if there's a time to slide, now's the time to do it rather than a little bit later on in the season as we get closer to the playoffs. Hopefully, the Stars get past this cold spell at some point and they're able to find themselves in a position where they start trending upwards yet again right before the start of the postseason. And then you ride that momentum into that first round series and hopefully use that to get yourself through the playoffs, which was, we all know, are brutal. I mean, it's a gauntlet once you get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And thankfully, the Stars would be playing on the Western Conference side, which looks like it's going to be a little bit easier to get through than the Eastern Conference. The Eastern Conference is brutal. And do not envy the teams that have to play on that side of the bracket. You're probably getting one of the best teams in the league that makes it to the Stanley Cup Finals out of the East, but they are going to be battered and bruised by the time they make it there because that conference is tough. And thankfully, the Stars might not have as difficult of a road, but that also depends on where they place in the bracket and where they find themselves in the division and conference standings. Well, we're going to take one more quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk about the history of good NHL teams slumping, the times of the year that they did it, and why this is the ideal time for the Stars to have their slump and why they could benefit from eventually coming out of it near the end of the regular season. This episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook app, because the new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and three-pointers drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Closing out this Monday episode of Locked On Stars. Thank you guys again for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. And if you're like me and you want to maintain some sort of positive attitude through this Stars dry spell, you can do what I've started to do and take a look at some of the recent successful NHL teams from years past and see that their seasons were not always sunshine and rainbows, realizing that every team, every season is going to have high points and they're going to have low points. And if you look at the Stars season, they've had way more highs than lows, and they're probably at their deepest low at the moment. But there's still plenty of season left for them to get things back on track. And if you look, I mean, all throughout NHL history, especially recent NHL history, you'll see that many teams that went on to win the Stanley Cup at one point, things did not look so great. You even look at the 2019 St. Louis Blues. I apologize for bringing them up on this podcast, but they're a great example to this point. To start the season, they were not a great team. They were a team that was just kind of a middle of the pack group, 4-5-3 to start the season. The first month or so, things actually looked good numbers wise for them. They were second in power play percentage, 12th in the NHL in goals for. They just couldn't play any defense. They were 7th in the NHL in goals given up. This was a team that could do a lot of things really well, but they just couldn't string wins together consistently and weren't really at the top of the standings to start the season. But then they really started to heat up around the second half of the campaign. And of course, we all know what happened. They rode that momentum to winning the Stanley Cup in a 7-game series against the Boston Bruins. But I mean, and every team's cold spell is going to come at a different time in the year. The Blues, it was kind of at the start of the season for them, but you even look at the 2022 Colorado Avalanche, who went 1-5-1 in their last 7 regular season games. It obviously worked out for them. Everyone knew that Colorado team was something special, but that's not going to always be the case. Sometimes you have a team that falls apart a little bit the last week or two of the season, and then that bad mojo, that bad momentum, the negative momentum sticks with them as they go into that first round series. And I think it can go the other way. You can have a great team like the Tampa Bay Lightning, who seem to have everything put together in that 2019 postseason, and they come out and get swept by the bottom seed Columbus Blue Jackets. And so, I mean, as long as the Stars are able to get to the playoffs, which at this point I think that they will, I think that they're going to be okay. But really, at this point, you also would like to see them get that at least first spot in the Central Division, if not first spot in the West. So then every series has to come through their building. They get that home ice advantage, which is oh so critical in the Stanley Cup playoffs with how much travel there is and just how grueling that grind of a schedule and travel can be. Super important for this team. But all that being said, I mean, you can, and I'm sure you could go even farther back in, the 2000s, the 90s, the 80s. No championship team, no championship contending team has a perfect season from start to finish. And so again, if there's any solace in it, you can look at it from that perspective. I know I've found that it's just more exhausting to be negative and down and out all of the time. I know it's frustrating to watch a team go through spells like this, to go through stages like this in a season, but you've got to continue to try to find the positives where you can and focus on those positives and know that sooner or later, a team like this that has shown these flashes of greatness is going to find a way to get back on track. Again, we've seen more good from this team than bad. They're going to find a way to do it. Does this mean that they're going to win a Stanley Cup automatically just because they're facing the adversity now and they climb out of it? That's hard to say. You can't guarantee that, and especially with the teams in the Western Conference that they'd have to get through. And then even if they get through those guys, the teams out east, again, you're probably getting the best, one of the best teams in the NHL in recent memory out of the Eastern Conference from this year's bracket. It's going to be easier said than done. But again, with what we've seen from this Stars team, I think that they have it in them to get it figured out. And I trust the coaching staff, the front office to make the right moves at the trade deadline. And I can't wait to see this team finally get back on track. And once they get their mojo back on the power play, it's going to be a beautiful thing to see once paired alongside the things that are still going well for this team. Again, some pretty good defense, some pretty good penalty killing for the most part. And of course, some excellent goaltending from Jake Ottinger. If Jake Ottinger's between the pipes, which he is most nights for this team, they've got a shot to win the game. And now they just need to find a way to get him that insurance like they were in the earlier stages of this season. And a big part of that is getting that man advantage back on track, but also finding a way to keep that 5-on-5 game efficient as it was not too long ago, right? Right? Just right before the All-Star break. The Stars offense still was doing okay. And maybe also find a way to win a few overtime games if you must go past regulation. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars. Thank you again for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or the follow button on your favorite podcasting platform. We are always free and available no matter where or how you choose to listen. Be sure to keep tuning in this week as we'll be not as many games to talk about this week. A game on Wednesday against the Blackhawks, and then the Stars off again until Saturday. So, of course, we'll be keeping a pulse on all things trade deadline talk, roster moves, things of that nature. But thank you guys again for tuning in. Hope you guys have a great Monday, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.